Our stage design is brought to us, as it is every week, by William Abel, and the flag that you see displayed on the stage today is the actual flag that was given to a Steve Lemke's family. And you can see it's 48 stars from the time of 48 states. And Steve Lemke was a truck driver in the United States Navy. He was from Minnesota, and he served in the National Guard in the Philippines, where he was captured, and he was a prisoner of war for 2 years. And he was one of them who survived the Bataan Death March. But sadly, he died in the South Pacific in 1944 while he was being transported in an unmarked ship that was torpedoed by the American Navy. Steve Lemke was William Abel's great uncle, and we display the flag today as a reminder of the tragic nature of all conflict, and also to remember all those who have fallen during times of war. In President Obama's Memorial Day proclamation, he reminds us that in honor of all of our fallen service members, the Congress, by a joint resolution approved in 1950, May 11, has requested the President and all presidents to issue a proclamation calling on the people of the United States to observe each Memorial Day as a day of prayer for permanent peace, and to designate a period on that day when the people of the United States may unite in prayer. So let us do that then. I invite you to breathe in with me. And as you exhale, let your eyes close if you wish. And in this moment, let us embrace the peace of the Almighty. We are opening our minds and our hearts to this presence of peace that is everywhere. It is with us now. It always has been and always will be. It is permanent, eternal, and enduring. It is the peace that is within me and within every being who lives, and within every being who ever lived and who will ever live. And we are opening our awareness to this peace, and as we do that, we begin to feel our oneness with each other and with all creation. Through this prayer, I am remembering that I am a spirit expressing the peace of the one Spirit. I am a vehicle for the delivery of the peace of God, and this is true for all beings. We are united in that peace that God is. And so in the midst of life's activities, its celebrations and challenges, I pause to redirect my thought to the power of God within as peace. With every breath I take, I affirm peace. With every word I speak, I support peace. With every thought I think, I confirm peace. Right here in this moment and in every moment, that peace exists. And so I'm acknowledging it as the power that moves through my being, the power that establishes me in gratitude for all who have contributed to my life. What a blessing it is to remember this. My heart is full, and so I release this word of prayer. And as I do so, I feel the joy of being renewed in my commitment to honor and cherish the peacemakers in my life. And together we say, and so it is. Our theme for May is spiritual wisdom and personal responsibility. And we've been talking about that all month and actually all year, about how to show up in the world in such a way that we bring goodness into expression. We're trying to show up in our best possible way. And I was thinking, all of this work, It requires soul searching. And it's the kind of work that takes both courage and gentleness, because I want to be careful. I think we ought to be careful that we don't slip into the trap of being self-critical because we're not yet as perfect as our vision calls us to be. Secretly harboring disappointment in ourselves that we haven't attained it yet. Because I'm remembering that love is not caused by hatred, and peace is not ushered in through violence, and self-love is not developed through self-criticism. So today, instead of focusing once again on what there is to improve in ourselves, perhaps we can let ourselves focus instead on that within us which requires no improvements whatsoever. So that with all of this reaching and developing and learning and striving, we can at the same time remember that there is something within us that remains untouched by this world. There is a piece of writing in Ernest Holmes' writings that's one of my favorite, and it speaks to this. It says, "You have a friend within you who is closer than your shadow. This friend anticipates your every desire, knows your every need, and governs your every act. This friend is the God within your own soul. It is your animating presence. This friend within you is infinite, and since it is infinite, it is not limited by previous experiences that you might have had, not by present conditions and not by passing situations. It has no inherited tendencies, no limitation. It has never been caught in the mesh of circumstances. It is at all times radiant and free. It is your inner, absolute, and perfect self. Now, this friend within you is different from all other persons, yet united with them. There is some part of you which reaches into the nature of others, thus irresistibly drawing them to you and you to them, binding it all together in one beautiful unity. The friend within you lives in a state of poise. It is above fear. It is beyond hurt. It is sufficient to itself. The friend within you is continually looking to your well-being, always desiring for you to be happy, to be well, to be radiant. It is the very fountain of your life and a luminous presence in your being. It is the high counselor, the eternal guide. It is the essence of your understanding, and there can be no greater unity than exists between you and this inner friend. It spreads a table before you in the wilderness of human thought and activity. Its cup of joy runs over. It laughs. It triumphs. And when this present experience of yours shall be rolled up like a scroll, it will pass on to new and greater experiences. But for today, it is here. This friend is here, so trust it. Trust it today. And you may trust it for all the tomorrows yet to come. Now, possibly, it may be difficult for you to believe that there is such a friend. But it is there, at the very center of your being, directing your thought and causing you to triumph over everything, for it in you is an unconquerable hero. It is the one who keeps silent watch within you and lifts you into the realization of what is alive in you. Now, this writing is describing that which we call your essential nature. Not your history, not what you've done, not what you hope to do, not your salary, not your talents, not your family configuration, not your knowledge, not your skills, your true nature. It's that something within you which is aware and has watched from the very beginning and watches now as you do whatever it is you do. And we call it the silent witness of the soul. We think of it as that part which has always existed even before time began. It's the part of you that is immortal and unchanging and enduring. It is life itself. It's your real self. And I want to suggest to you today that you think of it as something in you, something about you that doesn't require any fixing at all. It is in a state of innocence and wholeness. And the thing about wholeness is that wholeness cannot become more whole. It doesn't evolve. It doesn't get better. It can't be educated. It can't be improved or increased. Wholeness is in its eternal, unchanging state, as it was in the beginning when you were created. Its mark was upon you, and it remains your true nature to this day and beyond until forever. And another way of saying all that is to say that you and I are as spiritual as we are ever going to be. There is about as much holiness in us as there ever will be. There is as much life in us as there ever will be. Sure, it's easy to forget that. I mean, the dust and grime of the journey will do that. It will cover it up, which is why we seem to be continuously on the track of relearning how to accept our true nature and re-identifying with it and expressing again from it and living from it. And I think from the moment, and this moment happens all the time, from the moment that we wake up to this reality of what is alive in us, all the past falls away. And the future becomes rich with unexpressed potential, and the current moment becomes alive with awe and wonder. So, you might be thinking, if everything is already so perfect, why do we pray? What are we seeking? What do we pray for? Well, among other things, I think we pray because we do forget what is alive in us. We pray that we might wake up from the deep sleep in which we are dreaming, that we are too fat, too thin, too old, too pale, too ugly, too unlovable, too unworthy, too late, too little, too awkward, too mean, too stupid, too clumsy, too vindictive, too whatever is in the nightmare. It's a paradox, because we are being asked on one hand to consider the perfection that lives within us. We call it our true self. Yet on the same time, on the other hand, there's this little me, call it my ego self, and it may have habits that are less than beautiful. It may have done things. It may have spoken in ways that are less than charitable, and may have used life in ways that are less than honorable. I don't know about you, but there have been times in my life when I have felt less than a perfect expression of the divine. I don't know about you, but there have been times in my life when I have behaved in ways that I would say are not consistent with the teachings of the center. I don't know about you, but there have been times in my life when I have not been proud of my innermost thought. But it's all me. The highest self and the lowest self and all the selves in between. And to be truly loving and to be truly accepting, I have to admit it all. And I have to embrace it all. And I have to admit that when I was acting for my lowest self in those times, I was doing, at the time, the very best I knew how, with whatever maturity and awareness I had at the time. And I get it, my higher self doesn't evolve. But my lower self certainly can and wants to. Do you remember David Viscott? He was an amazing radio personality, a psychiatrist. He said the most beautiful things on the airwaves. And wrote. And he wrote this: "You are the sum total of everything you did, thought, said, dreamed, avoided, embraced, abandoned, disputed, suffered, felt, expressed, withheld, promised, lost, gained, owned, borrowed, inherited, stole, needed, and loved. There is no avoiding yourself. You are all the good and all the bad, all the times spent in joyous rapture and all the days of mourning and lamentation. You are your soul, and your body is just a vessel, sometimes abused by self-deception and showing the wearing, telling marks of indifferent upkeep. What is it to dispute what everyone else knows? What is to be gained by denying what you know in your heart? And it's this, that you are as good as you are and your faults are plenty. So come, accept yourself. The day is still young and there is time aplenty left to play." What an invitation. Come. Accept yourself, your whole self. And if you can't see yourself doing it yet, maybe you can turn to that inner presence, the friend within, to do the accepting on your behalf, because it's less judgmental. It will accept you just the way that you are and just the way that you are not. Come. Almost 20 years ago, I read this story when it was still fresh. Remember Chicken Soup for the Soul? And it's appropriate to read today for Memorial Day. And it's also about a person from Minnesota, a nun who taught math, I believe, junior high. The story goes, one Friday, things just didn't feel right. We had worked hard on a new concept all week, and I sensed the students were growing frustrated with themselves and edgy with one another. I had to stop this crankiness before it got out of hand. So I asked them to list the names of the other students in the room on 2 sheets of paper, leaving a space between each name. Then I told them to think of the nicest thing they could say about each of their classmates and write it down. That Saturday, I wrote down the name of each student on a separate sheet of paper, and I listed what everyone else had said about them. On Monday, I gave each student his or her list. Some of them even ran to 2 pages. Before long, the entire class was smiling. "Really?" I heard whispered. I never knew that meant anything to anyone, I heard. I didn't know others liked me. Well, no one ever mentioned those papers in class again. And The groups of students moved on, and several years later, after I had returned from a vacation, my parents were at the airport to meet me with the news that one of my students had been killed in Vietnam. After the funeral, most of his former classmates headed to a farmhouse for lunch. His mother and father were there, obviously waiting for me. "We want to show you something," his father said, taking a wallet out of his pocket. "They found this on Mark when he was killed, and we thought you might recognize it." Opening the billfold, he carefully removed 2 worn pieces of notebook paper that had obviously been taped and folded and refolded many times. I knew without looking that the papers were the ones on which I had listed all of the good things each of Mark's classmates had said about him. "Thank you so much for doing that," Mark's mother said. "As you can see, Mark treasured it." Few of us know just how precious we are. Few of us know just how wonderful we are. I mean, as we're growing up, we may be given lots of skill to help us learn to cope and get through this world, but sometimes I worry that in all the rushing to get wherever it is we're going there, sometimes we rush right over and miss the wonder and beauty of what is alive in us, of what lives in us. And if we don't know what is alive in us, how will we recognize it in anybody else? And if we do not know what is alive in us, we may fall for anything that anyone tells us about who we are. Giuseppe Verdi, you know, composer, famous composer, masterpieces, opera, you know. He was born in Italy, 1813. We got his first music lesson from a small town organist, taught him how to play. But the people of the town recognized how talented he was. And so they made a collection and they created a fund to send him to Milan, to the School of Music there, the Conservancy, so he could develop his skill. But when he got there, he was denied admission for being too old and too poorly trained. What if he stopped there? What if he listened to them when they said no? What if he didn't know that within him was a creative power, a genius that was waiting for him to translate into the world in a way that no other person would ever duplicate again? My God. We'd have no Aida, no Don Carlos, no Macbeth, no Falstaff, no Othello, no La Traviata, no Il Trovatore, no music. And if it is too much to believe that you are that wonderful, then perhaps what we can do is turn our attention this week to the life that lives within us, to try and imagine that no matter what it is I'm doing, that something in me remains kind. No matter where I am, something in me remains innocent. No matter what it is I'm doing, something in me remains good. Something in me is permanently and eternally and enduringly in its original state. And if you don't know that, if you don't live your life from that, if you don't act upon that, I wonder just how much we will have to go without I wonder just what the world will miss if you don't translate what is in you into what it must become. Ernest Holmes wrote, "Refuse to receive anyone's condemnation." And I add, and yours as well. He writes, "In the independence of your own mind, believe and feel that you are wonderful." This is not conceit. It's just accurate. What can be more wonderful than the manifestation of the divine in you? You know, Verdi was turned away for being too old. And it tickles me. It's funny that I love that with his wealth, he built a home for aged musicians. It reminds me, it's not selfish to love yourself. It's imperative. Because love of each other comes naturally and easy out of a heart that knows what is alive in it. Love for each other comes from our true self, from our essential nature, from our best self. That's another word David Viscott used, a phrase to describe our inner self, your best self. Here's what he wrote about it. Within you is an island of sanity, your best self. It is a source of power, a reservoir of strength, and you find it only when you believe in yourself. And you present it to others only when it is safe for you to be yourself. So choose to be with people who care about you, who bring your best out. Your best self is found in acceptance and nurtured in simplicity and maintained in vulnerability. Loving yourself and telling the truth is being your best self. If you don't tell the truth, your best self eludes you. When you live a life that is less than your best, you have less to give the world. And when you're not your best, the world suffers, and your presence may even be a drain. Your best self starts sentences with the word I love, I understand, I accept, I forgive, I trust. Your best self is defined by giving. Your best self is childlike, open-eyed with wonder, expecting to produce magic but never looking to be delivered by others from whatever. So keep company with your best self, and you will be a friend to the world. I invite you now to take a breath in with me, and to exhale, letting your eyes close as we take a moment to contemplate that which is alive within each one of us.